In the late 1990s, 8 people in Britain received a terrifying phone call from a man claiming to be MI5. He told them the IRA wanted them dead. He told them their phones were bugged, their families in danger, and that only he could protect them. For 10 years, they believed him. His name was Robert Hendy-Freegard. He had never been a spy. He was a bartender. It began in 1993 at a pub attached to Harper Adams Agricultural College in rural Shropshire. Robert Hendy-Freegard was working behind the bar, charming and magnetic, the kind of man who remembered every student's name and seemed genuinely interested in their lives. But he was also watching them. Collecting information. Building a list of the vulnerable. One evening, Hendy-Freegard pulled John Atkinson, a quiet agricultural student, aside and dropped his voice to a whisper. He said he was not really a bartender. He said he was an undercover MI5 officer embedded at the college investigating an IRA cell. And then he leaned in closer. "We think some of your friends are involved. We need your help." John Atkinson was terrified. He was not someone who looked for danger, he was the type who worked hard, did what he was told, and trusted authority. But Hendy-Freegard was so calm, so knowledgeable, so utterly convincing. John believed every word. From that moment, he was trapped. Hendy-Freegard told John that the IRA was watching him. That his phone was bugged. That he was in real, immediate danger. To stay safe, John had to follow Hendy-Freegard's instructions exactly: give him money for safe houses, cut off friends who might be informants, never tell anyone the truth. John obeyed. He had no choice. John was not alone for long. Hendy-Freegard repeated the same performance with other students. Each was told the same lie. Each was told the same IRA threat was real. Each handed over money. Each cut themselves off from their families. Within a year, he had at least 5 people under his complete psychological control. By 1998, Robert Hendy-Freegard had moved his operation beyond the college. He found new victims, including Kim Adams, a woman in her late 20s who believed she was also under IRA surveillance. For the next decade, Hendy-Freegard kept all 8 of his victims in a state of constant fear. He controlled where they lived, who they saw, what they spent their money on. He told them that love, family, friendship, all of it was a security risk. Over the decade, Hendy-Freegard extracted hundreds of thousands of pounds from his victims. He told them it was for safe houses, for protection, for operational costs. He told them the money was going to MI5. None of it did. He spent it on himself, holidays, expensive restaurants, a comfortable life built entirely on lies. By the late 1990s, John Atkinson's mother had not heard from her son in years. She knew only that he was in safe houses for work, that she could not contact him. When she finally managed to see him, he was thinner, exhausted, terrified of saying the wrong thing. She began to ask questions. Hendy-Freegard, when he found out, told John his mother was a security threat and had to be cut off completely. In 2002, one of Hendy-Freegard's victims finally broke the spell. After nearly a decade, they started to question whether the IRA threat was real. They looked back at 10 years of payments, of isolation, of obedience. The truth hit them like a shock: there was no IRA cell. There was no MI5. There was only a man who had stolen their youth and their money. DC Bob Brandon at the West Mercia Police took the first call. As he listened to the victim's story, he knew this was not a simple fraud. This was systematic psychological abuse on an industrial scale. He began to piece together the network: 8 victims, spanning nearly a decade, controlled through a single lie. The investigation would take months. In May 2005, Robert Hendy-Freegard was arrested at his home. He was charged with conspiracy to defraud, obtaining property by deception, and coercive control. He was 37 years old. For 12 years, he had lived a double life: a charming bartender to some, a predatory liar to his 8 carefully selected victims. At trial, one by one, Hendy-Freegard's victims testified. They described 10 years of terror, isolation, and control. They described handing over their savings, their trust, their sense of reality. They described how a single lie, delivered with charisma and conviction, had stolen a decade of their lives. The evidence was overwhelming. In September 2007, Robert Hendy-Freegard was convicted of conspiracy to defraud and sentenced to 6 years in prison. The court found that he had systematically exploited his victims' vulnerabilities through a calculated campaign of psychological manipulation. The judge noted that the impact on his victims would last far longer than his sentence. Robert Hendy-Freegard was released in 2009 on license. His 8 victims spent years in therapy, rebuilding trust, reclaiming their lives. Kim Adams, John Atkinson, and the others had to learn how to exist in a world that was not hunting them. The scars of coercive control do not heal quickly. Some never fully do. The case of Robert Hendy-Freegard became a landmark in the understanding of coercive control in the UK. It exposed how a single person, armed with intelligence, charm, and no conscience, could psychologically enslave 8 people across a decade. It changed how police and prosecutors understand psychological abuse. It became a warning: trust is a currency, and some people will spend it ruthlessly. Today, Robert Hendy-Freegard is still alive. He served his sentence and was released. His victims are still rebuilding. And the question that haunts them remains unanswered: how did one man convince 8 intelligent people that a complete lie was their only truth? The answer is simple and terrifying: he studied them, he listened to them, and he knew exactly which fears to exploit. If you or someone you know is trapped in a situation where someone is controlling your money, your contact with family, or your sense of reality, please reach out to the police or to a domestic abuse support service. The case of Robert Hendy-Freegard shows us how real that danger is. If you found this story powerful, please like this video and follow our page for more cases that expose the psychology of coercive control and the resilience of survivors.